First, LessWrong post, Purpose and Pragmatism, opens up with that whole tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? One says, yes, it does. Vibrations in the air. The other says, no, there's no auditory processing in any brain.
Yeah, so this is just a semantics argument. They're fighting over the definitions of the word sound. Like, is sound vibrations in the air, or does it have to be sound if a brain processes it? They don't have the labels, so the word sound doesn't have the intrinsic definition, though, only the agreed upon definitions. So that's why arguments like this are the worst, because people don't taboo words or define things clearly.
I remember I annoyed a coworker at a couple jobs ago who was like, apparently there was a question going around the internet at the time, is water wet? And I was like, I suspect it would be, because
that's a good answer. Period.
Because then he was like, well, no, but wet means being covered in water. And I was like, well, the water's covering itself. And frankly, let's look at it this way. What difference does it make? What would you
just make up that definition? Because
I'm not sure. But in any case, I just hit him with what would you anticipate to look different if water was wet or wasn't wet? And he was just like, that's no fun. And so I took the wind out of his sails by throwing a wet blanket of rationality on his stupid question.
So the dictionary definition for wet is, in fact, covered or saturated with water or another liquid. But then there's the informal British adjective, which is showing a lack of forcefulness or strength of character. Feeble.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I like it. That's really funny. All right. So this comes up because this whole does water I brought up that water is wet thing because nothing depended on either outcome of that question, right? But Eliezer's talking here about purpose and pragmatism, that if you need to know about the forest for any pragmatic reason, if there's anything you plan on doing with the knowledge, then the answer is no longer a matter of mutual agreement. And I liked his example of the landmines. And it's look, if landmines are triggered by sound and a tree falls over, I need to know whether or not the landmines are going to explode. And so it's the second that the answer actually matters, suddenly we're going to be a lot less stupid bickery over the question.
This just writes its own comedy script where I'm imagining Sergeant, does a tree if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? Well, sir, I think it just gets into this more and more philosophical debate. If I were less lazy, I would write that up. But so he asks, does this mean that truth reduces to usefulness? But this itself would be a purpose loss, a sub-goal stomp, a mistaking of the indicator for the indicated. Usefulness for prediction is one of the best indicators of truth. That doesn't mean usefulness is truth. And then he adds the layperson example. Driving to the supermarket is not eating chocolate.
Yeah, I like that. And I think he's nailing home the point about the, two textbook answers of what is rationality, epistemological clarity versus goal optimization. But he says there is nonetheless a deep similarity between the pragmatic and the epistemic arts of rationality in matter of keeping your eye on the ball. And that's always been my answer too. Maybe I stole it subconsciously from this post, because I feel basically in every case those two definitions will point in the same direction.
Yeah, I think that's kind of already an idea that's pretty embedded in rationality, whether or not you saw it from this post.
I think you're right.
But it also makes sense. For pragmatic rationality, it means holding on to your purpose, being aware of how each act leads to its consequence, not losing sight of utilities and leaky generalizations about expected utilities. And in epistemic rationality, it's holding on to your question, being aware of what each indicator says about its indicatee. Indicatee? It's a weird word.
Indicatee sounds right.
Not losing sight of the original question in fights over indicators. And then the layperson example. I like when he does these because, I think that's the thing people run into with the sequences where they're leaky generalizations about expected utilities? Nobody knows what the hell that means if they're just coming here from nowhere.
Right.
But pragmatic rationality, these are sort of the failure modes. Driving to the supermarket may almost always get you chocolate, but on some occasions it won't. And the epistemic rationality side, seeing a chocolate for sale sign in the supermarket may almost always indicate that chocolate's available, but on some occasions it will not.
It's just the deep connection between the human art of pragmatic and epistemic rationality, which does not mean that they are the same thing.
Yeah. I'm saying that there is a deep connection between these two arts. And that's the end of the post.
Nailed it. All right, post 2, the affect heuristic. I like this one, and all the ones that talk specifically about like a bias or heuristic are always I think many of my favorites.
Yeah, I feel like this one's kind of a classic. Then again, I feel like I don't know. I feel like I feel that about a disproportionate number of the posts, or I'm like, oh yeah, this one.
I feel like a lot of them are classics.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if it seems like, I mean, I don't know what the threshold could be on what percentage of them are allowed to be classics, right? I think as long as it's not 100%, then it's fine, right?
Well, it's certainly not, because there's a few what the fucks in there, but the most of them, yeah, tend to be pretty pragmatic.
Yeah, why not?
Or enlightening. Anyway, what is it? The affect heuristic is when subjective impressions of goodness or badness act as a heuristic, a source of fast perceptual judgments. Pleasant and unpleasant feelings are central to human reasoning, but they come with their own lovely biases. And he has some examples. I did not include all of them, but just I think the ones that are the most illustrative. So the first one is you have to ship an antique clock. And there's 2 scenarios. In one of them, it's this gift that you got from your grandparents when you were 5, and in the other, it's some random person gave it to you. You don't really care about it. There's these study participants that are given these scenarios and asked, how much would you pay to insure it for $100? And the study showed that people were willing to pay twice as much if they were given the story that you have special feelings about this clock. And so that seems rational at first glance, but then if you squint at it, the insurance doesn't protect the clock. It just pays $100 for its loss, and that's regardless of how much you paid for the insurance. And then this is more charitable than I would have just laughed at there, but he said, well, maybe you could get away with claiming the subjects were ensuring effective outcomes, not financial outcomes. The purchase of consolation.
That is actually where my head went immediately. I remember, I don't know if this was my first time, if that was my thought the first time reading this post ages ago, but it definitely was this time, that like, I don't want the $100 because an antique clock is worth more than $100 already, right?
Maybe.
I guess the price of the clock aside, it's like, no, I want compensation because I liked the thing, right? If I could take it or leave it, then I don't really care if it gets lost forever, right? But I care about if I liked the thing, I want consolation money to go buy.
But you're gonna get $100 either way.
Well, only if they lose the clock, right?
Yeah, maybe you could say that if you paid $200, or I don't know how much you're supposed to have paid for the insurance, but if you paid twice the amount, maybe it's just that's just the insurance company. That they're not necessarily tied to the shipping company. Huh.
They made sure in the thought experiment apparently to point that out, that there was no perverse incentives there. No, don't get me wrong. I realize that financially it makes no sense, but it's like, yeah, I'd pay $20 for a $100 insurance policy on this clock because like I would feel bad if I lost it. But if it's something that if it fell out of the truck on the way to my new home or something anyway, and I wouldn't care, then
I can't really
they'd be lucky to get any insurance money out of me for it.
I could start to feel some of these, but this one just didn't click for me. Like I'm kind of like it's the same outcome either way, and I don't have any control here.
I think it's that like I just want the $100 to make me feel better at having lost the clock.
But you get it either way. If you paid the cheaper or the like double price insurance, that's the amount it was going to pay out.
Right, but I don't think they asked the people. I don't think you could get a different number out of the same participant. I feel like I don't know if the post talked about it or if it links to the actual study, but
oh yeah, they probably blinded it so that you weren't aware that there were these 2 options.
That's the only way it would work. Yeah. If someone presented me with both options, saying, look, do you want the $10 policy for the $100 insurance or the $20 policy for the $100 insurance? I'd say the $10 policy. Thank you very much. But if you asked me without knowing that there was another option,
do you want to get insurance versus not, and then here's how much it costs?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that makes more sense for a study design. This post doesn't include the details of the study design or a link to it, although it does have the. Well, I think maybe it does in the citations, but anyway. Another example.
This one was nuts.
A study showed subjects judged a disease as being more dangerous when it was described as killing 1,286 people out of every 10,000 versus a disaster that was 24.14% likely to be fatal. Apparently, the mental image of 1,000 dead bodies is much more alarming.
Yeah, they're both diseases. I think he's a disaster for the second one.
But yeah, it might have been.
But that's the funny thing is, it's twice as fatal, right? In the second case. but 24% doesn't sound as like
It doesn't mean anything.
Apparently to people.
You're like, that cool, there's a number. Nobody like is thinking about, they're not doing the math in their head. Well, if it's 10,000 people, then 24% of it, I mean, oh my God, all this, like, you have to kind of present them with the details up front.
Or at least give them two percentages, right? So killing 1,286 people out of 10,000, that's what, 12.86%? And so, like, for me, I'm like, did I drop a zero there? Am I off by an order of magnitude? I have to actually think about it. But I look at 24%, I'm like, okay, that's like 1 in 4. If you told me the other one was 12.86%, and I'd be like, okay, that's half of 24%, close enough. So I know that it's half as scary as the 24% one. That makes sense, but I think it's that people didn't convert to fractions properly in the first case.
I think it was, maybe it was split in two groups where, again, they only showed the, one group of participants, the 1,000, and the other one's the 24%.
Yeah, I suppose. I wonder, judge's disease is more dangerous. Yeah, again, I don't know if it was blinded or not. I think that's the tough one. All right, this one was funny. The airport, or no, we skipped the airport one.
You can say it if you wanted to.
No, that's fine.
I didn't think it illustrated a new concept like each of these kind of is.
No, I read the parenthetical where you wrote skips the airport one, but I meant to. I was thinking of the one at the beans.
Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Study showed that subjects offered an opportunity to win $1 each time they randomly drew a red jelly bean from a bowl, often preferred to draw from a bowl with more red beans and a smaller proportion, or with more red beans and a smaller proportion of red beans, e.g., 7 in 100 was preferred to 1 in 10. The drag of this part, like this example here, is that it didn't say how many times you got to draw from the urn, right? Or from the jar. Like, if you can draw as many times as you want, I would take the 7 out of 100.
It is, but it's the same probabilities. I mean, assume that you get $1 potentially per draw, and then you can do it as many times as you want. They're either handing you a jar with 10 in 1 chance or like 7 in 100.
But if one jar has 10 beans in it, one of which is red, I win a max of $1, right? The other one has 100 beans in it, 7 of which are red. If I'm allowed to draw 100 times, I win $7 in the second jar. Right?
I think you're given the same probabilities each time. It wouldn't make sense otherwise.
Yeah.
Like if you're depleting the numbers.
It's got to give you, some X number of draws based on how many are in there.
I clipped the next comment out of this, but I actually just sort of want to read this whole paragraph because it's very funny.
It is.
So, according to Dene, Raj, and Epstein, these subjects reported afterward that even though they knew the probabilities were against them, they felt they had a better chance when there were more red beans. This may sound crazy to you, oh statistically sophisticated reader, but if you think more carefully, you'll realize it makes perfect sense. A 7% probability versus a 10% probability may be bad news, but it's more than made up for by the increased number of red beans. It's a worse probability, yes, but you're still more likely to win, you see. You should meditate upon this thought until you attain enlightenment as to how the rest of the planet thinks about probability.
Eliezer does a good job in the supermajority of his writing to not talk down about normal people, but I feel like in this he's
frustrated. Normies.
Yeah. Well, and to be fair, like I said, in the intuitive example, like how many draws do I get, I totally get where most people are coming from, because I'm not like probabilistically, sophisticated out of the box like he was. So they're wrong, and I see that, but I think that you might have to have had to explain it to me if I was doing this in the context of a study too, like what made the other option bad. I don't know. I have to think. It depends, I guess, when you ask me, but it's just, again, if I'm looking at 2 jars and like, let's say like, all right, right now you can see through the jars, but then we're going to make them, opaque here in a second. And I see 1 bean here and I see a handful of beans in this one. I'm like, well, I want that one, right?
Yeah. That one has more of a goodness affect.
Yeah.
You're not doing the math. And then I think it's not just a jab at normies, because at the end he has some more examples. I just kind of summarized them. Some more studies showed high benefits made people perceive lower risks. Higher risks made people perceive lower benefits. People conflate their judgments about particularly good, bad aspects of something into an overall feeling of good or bad about that thing. Time pressure greatly increased the inverse relationship between perceived risk and perceived benefit. And This is where I said it's not just normies, because he was talking about in the finance industry, when judging familiar stocks, analysts' judgment of the risks and returns were positively correlated, as conventionally predicted. But when judging unfamiliar stocks, analysts tend to judge the stocks as if they were generally good or generally bad, just like the rest of us. So, yep, this is a bias that, that's what makes biases, because there's a bit intrinsic. They're kind of wired into most people, and you have to, it's not really like, it's not like elitist. It's just saying that like a lot of people are ignorant about statistics, because when do you, get, I was gonna say, when do you get taught statistics? I guess in like high school or college, but
You very easily can go your entire life
Yeah.
without being taught it.
or you could learn it and forget it immediately, like people do with most subjects in school.
Oh
Don't
yeah,
really apply it to real life.
I think you can totally graduate high school and probably college for most majors without ever having to take a statistics course. But even if you take statistics, say in college, did you learn statistics or did you pass a course, right? So I think that there's a huge difference there. The good teachers will make sure you actually learn the stuff, but they're few and far between. I'm wondering about the one that said they also found that time pressure increased the inverse relationship between perceived risk and perceived benefit. And so I'm trying to parse that. For some reason, my head is not doing that correctly. The increased the inverse relationship between risk and benefit. Is that saying that like
Let's continue. Time pressure greatly increased the inverse relationship between perceived risk and perceived benefit, consistent with the general finding that time pressure, poor information, or distraction all increase the dominance of perceptual heuristics over analytical deliberation?
And so in a normal situation, you're thinking, okay, well, the
I think it's just referencing the previous point, where it was the high benefits make people perceive lower risks, high risks make people perceive lower benefits.
okay, that's right. And if there's time pressure, like to hurry up and make a decision,
It makes you even more likely to fall for the biases.
right? And so
Think about it.
it doesn't matter which if it's high risk or high benefit, whatever way you're thinking of it, or whatever way it's weighing in your head, the time pressure just increases that.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. I was grokking that the wrong way. I thought
I think it's just saying like the thing we already know is that stressing people out by putting a timer makes them make worse decisions, or makes them not worse decisions, makes them more likely to just jump back into their heuristics than do the math.
yeah. Well, I think what was tripping me up is I thought that when I read it the first 5 times in my head, I'm like, is it saying that it only works one way? But no, it just amplifies the affect heuristic, which like he said, or like you just said, and I think maybe he tries to touch on is that like when you're under time pressure, that is when you fall back on heuristics, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, if you've ever dodged anything on the highway, you do that on a quick, kind of pre-programmed action, right?
Oh yeah, there's no thought when a deer jumps in front of you suddenly.
Yeah. And so you just you engage in like, okay, quick, here's what I've got to do, right? Often, and actually this is a thing. Where was I recently? I can't remember actually, and I feel like it was a good example, but it was something that was like for sale. God, I wish I could remember, because I feel like I really just nailed it, but it was like, it's gonna drive me crazy. I can't think of when this was, because I feel like it's in the last couple of months. Anyway, some salesperson was hitting me with something, and they're like, yep, then the offer goes away in whatever. And I was like, oh, then never mind, I'm good.
Yeah.
And they were like, well, but why? It's a good deal. It's like, it might be, but the fact that you're putting a clock on it, I'm immediately out. I don't need whatever it is that you're selling.
Yeah, that's only to try to pressure you to make a decision under duress.
I don't make financial decisions under duress. God, I wish I could remember the example, and I can't remember anything that I bought lately that I would have been offered a deal on.
I still feel like you described it well enough.
I know, but now I'm just more bummed at my brain for having forgot. That's okay. All right. Anything else on those 2 posts?
Just that the last one ends with Eliezer recommending Slavich. This person's summary article called "Rational Actors or Rational Fools: Implications of the Affect Heuristic for Behavioral Economics."
Yes, if you're inclined, read that.
I'm assuming that's where most of the study details and inspiration for this post came from. So yeah, if you want to dig deeper into that.
Cool. Yeah, do check it out. And check out for next episode, we are doing Evaluability, parenthetically, and cheap holiday shopping. And Unbounded Scales, Huge Jury Awards, and Futurism. Those are both terrible titles, I'm going to just say. I don't remember the posts, but those are hard to say. Maybe I'm just dumb.